If you have been waiting on an EB3 green card, here is a number that matters: 52 to 54 months. That is roughly 4.5 years, and depending on where your priority date falls, the August 2026 Visa Bulletin either just moved you closer to the finish line, or it means you are still watching from the sidelines for a while longer. There is a real shift happening in the EB3 Other Workers category this month that a lot of people are going to miss if nobody explains it clearly. So, let us slow down and go through this together, step by step, in plain language. Because your green card timeline depends on understanding this correctly and not guessing. Every single month, the U.S. Department of State publishes something called the Visa Bulletin. And if you are going through the employment-based immigration process, this document is basically your entire world. It tells you whether the government has an immigrant visa available for someone in your category based on your priority date. And for employment-based cases, USCIS is currently instructing everyone to use what is called the Final Action Dates chart, not the Dates for Filing chart, which matters a lot because these two charts can move at completely different speeds and give you very different answers about where you actually stand. Now here is the big news for this month. The EB3 Other Workers final action date has advanced to April 1st, 2022. That might sound like just another date on a government chart, but for a lot of people, this single line means the difference between finally reaching the finish line of a years-long process or continuing to sit in the waiting room for a while longer. So, let us break down exactly what this means for you personally. If your employer filed your PERM Labor Certification before April 1st, 2022, congratulations. Your priority date is now considered current, which means you are eligible to move forward into the final stage of your green card process. Whether that is adjustment of status, if you are already inside the United States, or consular processing, if you are outside the country. If your priority date falls after that cutoff, I know this is not the answer you wanted to hear, but you are going to need to keep watching future bulletins and wait for that line to move forward and eventually reach your specific date. And I understand how frustrating that waiting game can feel, especially when you see other applicants moving forward and you are still stuck checking the bulletin every single month, hoping for good news. So let us talk honestly about how long this entire journey actually takes right now, because the numbers might surprise you in both directions. Applicants in the EB3 Other Workers category are currently looking at an overall wait of roughly 4.5 years, measured all the way from the moment the PERM Labor Certification gets filed to the moment an immigrant visa actually becomes available. Now here is where it gets interesting, because not every part of that timeline is moving at the same speed, and there is genuinely encouraging news buried inside this. The Department of Labor has recently been processing PERM applications that were filed about a year earlier, which tells us that particular stage of the process has been picking up real pace, even though individual case timelines can vary depending on your specific circumstances, your employer, and sometimes just which processing center handles your file. Once your PERM gets approved, the next step is the I-140 immigrant petition, and that stage is generally taking around 6 months to process these days, which again is relatively good news compared to some of the delays we have seen in past years. But here is the part that really matters, the part that explains why so many people still feel stuck, even when the earlier stages of the process are moving faster than before. And that is visa availability itself. This is, without question, the single biggest bottleneck in the entire EB3 journey right now. You could have a lightning-fast PERM approval and a smooth I-140 process, and you would still be sitting there waiting, simply because there are only so many visa numbers available each year, and demand in this category continues to outpace that supply. This is exactly why the Visa Bulletin backlog remains the primary reason so many applicants are stuck waiting years instead of months. Now, before we go any further, I want to make sure this next part is genuinely clear, because I know the term priority date gets thrown around constantly in this process. And if you are newer to all of this, it can sound more confusing than it needs to be. Your priority date is simply the day your employer filed your PERM Labor Certification on your behalf. Think of it like taking a number at a busy government office. That number represents your place in line, and the earlier your number, meaning the earlier your priority date, the sooner you become eligible once the Visa Bulletin cutoff finally reaches your specific date. It really is that straightforward once you strip away the legal language surrounding it. So once your priority date does become current, what actually happens next depends entirely on where you are physically located at that moment. If you are already living inside the United States, you may become eligible to file for adjustment of status, which allows you to transition your status without leaving the country. If you are currently outside the United States, your path forward runs through a United States consulate abroad instead. Both paths lead toward the same destination, permanent residency. But the procedural steps along the way look quite different, so it is worth understanding early on which one applies to your situation. Now, if you are finding this breakdown helpful and you want to stay ahead of these monthly changes instead of scrambling to catch up every time a new bulletin drops, this is a great moment to hit that subscribe button, because these updates come out every single month, sometimes with major movement, sometimes with almost none. And either way, you deserve to know exactly where you stand instead of guessing or relying on rumors floating around online. Let us zoom out for a second and look at the bigger picture, because it is worth not losing sight of the overall trend here. What we are seeing right now is genuinely a mixed picture, and honestly, that is probably the most accurate way to describe most immigration news these days. On one hand, both the PERM processing stage and the I-140 petition stage have shown real improvement, moving faster than they have in previous stretches. On the other hand, visa availability remains stubbornly the longest and most unpredictable part of this entire journey. And that reality is not something faster PERM or I-140 processing can fix on its own, because that piece of the puzzle depends on the annual supply of visa numbers set by law, combined with how much demand exists across the category competing for those same numbers. If your priority date falls before April 1st, 2022, you are genuinely approaching the final stage of this long road toward permanent residency. And that is a milestone worth acknowledging after what has likely been a long and, at times, exhausting wait. If your date falls after that cutoff, do not lose hope. And do not assume nothing is happening just because your specific line has not moved yet this month. These cutoff dates get reviewed and published every single month, and the only way to stay properly informed is to keep watching every new bulletin as it releases, rather than relying on outdated information or secondhand guesses from social media. I always encourage people going through this process to keep their documentation organized, stay in close contact with whoever is handling their case, whether that is an attorney or an accredited representative, and avoid making any major life decisions, like international travel or job changes, without first understanding exactly how those decisions might interact with your pending immigration case. This process rewards patience and preparation far more than panic, and the applicants who tend to move through it most smoothly are usually the ones who stay calm, stay organized, and stay informed, rather than the ones who make rushed decisions based on incomplete information. Before we wrap up, every single case is different, and nothing in this video should be treated as personal legal advice for your specific situation, because immigration law involves so many individual factors that only a qualified professional reviewing your actual case file can properly account for. If you found this breakdown useful, if it helped clear up even one piece of confusion about where you stand in this process, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button before you go, because next month's bulletin is coming, whether we are ready for it or not. And I want you to be the first to know exactly what it means for your case, instead of finding out secondhand or piecing it together from confusing headlines. Drop your priority date or your specific questions in the comments below, and I will do my best to address the most common ones in future breakdowns, because this community grows stronger when we share information and help each other understand a process that, frankly, was never designed to be easy to follow in the first place.